So I'm going to go ahead and get started, and because since we have a couple of guest speakers today, we want to make sure we welcome everybody and get a chance for the guest speakers to have a full and lively conversation. So first going to run through a couple of logistic reminders, and then I'm going to turn it over to our hosting teams, which are SDG 1415, who are going to lead our discussion today. So let's go on to the next slide. So for a couple of just reminders as you guys join in the call, whoops, one slide too many, there we go. When you join the calls, please make sure when you rename yourself on the screen, if you could add in the initials for your home institution. So if you go to your little blocks, you can rename it. So Cosmale would be Cosmale, either dash or whatever, CC for Colorado College, Shenway would be CSU, etc. And that way our guest speakers can actually see which institutions we have available and which ones are asking questions. So if everybody could do that as we're getting started, that would be awesome. Second, just a reminder, because we do have a fair number of folks on the call, to make sure you mute yourself at all times. We will do most of our discussions with videos off. And then we'll ask everybody to do a nice thank you wave at the end of our presentation, so our presentations get a chance to see everybody. We will use our questions in the chat box. Again, a reminder, this is a recorded call, so do post your questions in the chat box. And when the moderator calls on you, you can actually then ask your question, introduce yourself, and say which institution you're on, and turn on your video so then everybody can see you. And then remind to mute yourself when you're finished speaking. Next slide. So a couple of our other logistics reminders. This is to get everybody sort of geared up. We're halfway through, woohoo! We're at week 8, and the Global Virtual Conference. This is the closing project for all the SDG teams. This is the big team grade for many of the students here, is December 9th. So that date is set now, thanks to University of Derby as the host institution. The registration call is now open. So you can save the link here. You see there's an abstract submission, there's also a registration submission. Obviously for the SDG teams, you are submitting one abstract for your SDG team, but we're highly encouraging students who might want to submit a poster or something else to also apply. There's no cost, there's no fee. This is an opportunity to do a professional presentation. So just so that reminder, we'll keep reminding you of that as things move forward, to make sure you submit your abstracts, work with your teams to get that abstract ready to go, and to get everybody on the team registered. If you are an auditing student, please also do register, and feel free to submit your own work to be part of the conference. And you can see on the registration form that we will ask some questions on how to qualify your work in terms of topics and themes. All right, next slide. So we will send out a poster call. This is actually the poster from last year. This is the second annual virtual conference hosted by University of Derby. And in your teams, we have also shared, we'll share shortly, the linkages so you can see what was done last year. You can also see what some of the press conferences looked like that teams worked on for a similar effort the year before. So you can get an idea of what your final goal is as a team and what your final product is going to start to look like. So basically the pressure's on, because this is going to come up pretty fast, and we have to get this written by teams for those of you who are all getting grades. Next slide. So last two reminders before we turn it over to our speakers. This is a project. This class is part of a project, and part of our project is looking at the impact of multi-institutional learning, multicultural learning, the Sustainable Development Goals, and climate action. So we do ask that you please do fill out the survey. This is really informative for us. There are two pieces. One is the climate action survey, if you've not already done so. And the second is that we're doing steady reflective journaling. And it's the same questions we'll ask every week. And we please ask that you complete those reflective journaling each week with your teams. We are looking at change over time, processes, how you reflect upon learning about the different sustainable development goals. So we do ask that you should fill out that reflective journaling as a journaling exercise regularly during the semester. So ideally, we'd like to see this completed every week, especially by the students in the SDG teams. So next slide. So to make sure everybody's sort of gearing up and moving towards that final goal, we will repost this guest speaker schedule each week so you can see it, and your fellows are all aware of these teams. It's a pretty exciting schedule. It's actually full. We have guest speakers for every week going on until our Thanksgiving or winter break for the US students. So we don't have class that week. And then our virtual conference coming up very fast on December 9th, which is the week before our finals start from most of the US institutions. So Miguel and Mark Brown are hosting today, with it being hosted by SDG 1415. Next week, we have Simplot Corporation, which is out of Idaho, is the world #1, I believe, producer of potatoes. So if you've ever eaten McDonald's French fries or anything else, you have eaten their potatoes. And Brandy Wilson is their sustainability director. So we will go through and introduce the speakers in advance and repeat this schedule so you get to see and be familiar with the speakers as they come up. And for each of the hosting teams, you have time to ask questions, get in contact with the speakers. They can help you. We tried to assign them with the idea that they were familiar with your topic or engaged in your topic, so you get that direct one-on-one with a professional or someone outside of the immediate class on your SDG project. Next slide. I think I have one more slide to this. And actually, I don't know if Sarah W., do you want me to read through this, or would you like to speak real quick on this schedule, on the SDG team schedule?
Yeah, for sure. So this SDG team schedule, this will also be posted each week. This has been shared with your fellows. So for those that are involved in SDG team, your fellows are aware of these deadlines, but we wanted to make it just as transparent as possible for everyone involved in the team work. So again, we'll continue to update these. I reflected them on Wednesday and Friday deadlines, as Wednesday we have class. Friday, it's kind of the end of the week for a lot of fellows, at least in the States, when it comes to the working week. So just keep this in mind. And if you have questions about any of these deadlines or like rough goals that we have for tasks to complete, please let your fellows know. You can also send me a Slack message. That's fine too.
Great, thank you. And just would like to, again, to urge everyone that these are team efforts and team projects. We're in lots of different time zones. There are many students who are getting grades associated with this team, so please be, helpful to your teammates, those who are in the different classes that are all on slightly different schedules. And the idea is so that we all sort of work together towards this final goal at the virtual conference. So I think that's my last slide. And next slide, I believe I turn this over to Emma.
Yes, awesome. So hi, everyone. I'm Emma from group SDG 1415. Zach, who's the other fellow, is from Colorado College, and so they're on the quarter system, and he had finals today. So unfortunately, he's not able to make it, but he helped with organizing this. So I just wanted to start out by introducing the two guest speakers we have today. And then Miguel Trejo will be giving a presentation. And then throughout that, it would be great if you could send any questions you have to the Zoom chat box. And then after that, we'll be doing a discussion section. So this talk will be about like 20 to 40 minutes, and then we'll open it up for discussion. So maybe 20 to 30 minutes and then leaving room for lots of questions, because last week there were just so many amazing questions. So starting off with introductions, we have Miguel Trejo here, who is a doctoral candidate in Earth System Science at the National Institute for Space Research in Brazil. And so his focus is on social innovation as a strategy for enhancing flood resilience. And so as you all know, SDG 14 is about life below water, and then SDG 15 is life on land. And so our group is combining these two SDGs. And so I think Miguel is a perfect example of combining the two, thinking about kind of how water and land come together. And so in terms of education, Miguel got his master's degree in flood resilience management, or flood risk management, and his bachelor's degree in sustainable management of coastal areas from the National Autonomous University of Mexico. and he's worked on the advisory board and disaster risk reduction. He's a member of that, which is part of the NGO Water Youth Network. And he's also a consultant for the National Water Commission of Mexico and the National Autonomous University of Mexico. And also joining us as the discussant is Mark Urban, who is a biologist and associate professor of ecology and evolutionary biology at the University of Connecticut. And so his research focus is eco-evolutionary dynamics, microgeographic evolution, and biological responses to climate change. And he focuses on studying amphibians like salamanders and frogs. And so his education is, he got a bachelor's degree from Muhlenberg College and then a master's and PhD from Yale. He's the director of the Center for Biological Risk and also a fellow at the National Center for Ecological Analysis and Synthesis. So we really want to welcome you both. I'm very excited for this discussion today. Next, Miguel will share his slides, and then, so just to go over that schedule again, Miguel will talk for about 20 to 30 minutes, and then we'll have 5 minutes for Mark to, as the discussant, to kind of reflect on that presentation, and then we'll open it up for student questions, ending at 2 p.m. Mountain Time, right? Yeah. And then we'll go into breakout rooms for the student groups. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now. Trying to move this chat box. Okay. Miguel, does it work for you to share?
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Emma, for the introduction. Thank you, Gillian, as well, and Sarah, for inviting me to this class, to this lecture. It's a pleasure to me to be sharing this time with you guys. I know that there are people from many different countries, so it's kind of exciting for me to share a little bit about what I have done so far. So yeah, let me know if I escaping from the actual topic that we were meant to meet. Okay. So yeah, as Emma said, my background is basically that. I won't mention anymore. So, and yeah, I was a research assistant, consultant at the National Water Commission in Mexico and advisory board Water Youth Network. Yeah, and I have been collaborating with in different researchers that are mostly focused in disaster risk management. So that's a little bit about what I do so far, but I would actually like to know who you are. So if you can actually go to your telephone, I don't know if everyone has a telephone, and just open the camera and try to go to the QR and just type your question, just to know from where you are connecting from. So let me know if that works for you. Nice. Okay, we already have one. I will just leave a little bit. So I just want to kind of ice-breaking, a nice breaking session. So yeah. Okay. So I see that most of the people are from the Americas, and then from Europe, and then from Asia. So that's really exciting. And I think that there are some people from Australia as well, but they probably is kind of midnight there, so probably they couldn't meet there, right? So I also would like to know what academic degree would you like to complete? Just try to conduct my talk a little bit. Yes. Perfect. Wow. Okay, nice. It's actually interesting. So what I'm asking you these guys, before, yeah, because I will present a little bit more about our countries. So, and for this, I just look for some information about the Human Development Index, which has 3 different dimensions, different indicators and dimension index, which compounds the Human Development Index. And as you can see in this map, you have different levels according to your country or the country where you are based. So if you go more in detail, I actually went to look for information for the countries that I knew that people were going to participate in this meeting. I want you to pay attention in this because it's going to be related with what I will talk a little bit later. So as we can see here, like for example, I knew that there were some people from Australia with a Human Development Index, which is kind of very high, nearly 1, right? This is from 1 to 9. Life expectancy at Bear is kind of really high as well, every 3 years old, right? Expected years of schooling, 22 years in total. Then we have United States with different, but very similar actually, Human Development Index and life expectancy at birth and expected years of schooling, right? And then we have Brazil, where the country where I actually live in, which is with Human Development Index nearly 75. And then life expectancy 75 and expected years of schooling 15 years, right? And then we have the country where I come from. So it's very much the same than Brazil, as yeah, very much similar to what we actually can see in Peru. And I was very surprised. I mean, it was kind of scaring a little bit about this country. For example, what I found is Cameroon. The Human Development Index is very much like above the half of the whole index. And then we have the life expectancy at birth is 58. And compared to the one that we actually have for Australia is kind of 20 years difference. And expected years of schooling is kind of the half as well, right? But if we focus in what, for example, my own experience, right? So in Mexico, we have that people in average study like 14 years old, right? So, and in my experience, I have like 1 kindergarten, 6 years elementary school, 3 years middle school, 4 years bachelor's degree, 2 years master's degree, and it's going to be 4 years doctorate degree. So, and in total, it's going to be 24 years, which was I was scared about this data, you know, because what I want you to think is about the possibilities that we are, or inequalities that we have, not within the countries, but in the same country that we live. For example, I'm sure that in other countries, they have different data. And you can actually see, for example, how many years you can actually study and how the average people could actually study. So it's kind of a privilege, actually, to be doing, for example, in my case, a doctorate degree, because in Mexico, probably it's not that common. And yeah, I just want you to think about how many years you have studied. And that's related with the inequalities that we are living probably worldwide, but probably in the same series where we probably we're living right now. So I just brought these 2 pictures. Those 2 pictures are from Sao Paulo, and I really want you to see. To know what you actually see in these 2 pictures. So those 2 pictures are taken in Sao Paulo state, in the city of Sao Paulo as well, and in Brazil, where I currently live. And I really want you to think about what you actually see here. So please have a look, take 10 seconds, and type your answer in the next slide, okay? So I will move to the next one. So please type your answer. I would like to know what you actually see with those pictures. So yeah, I mean, it can be a word, it can be like a sentence as well. So just feel free to type anything that you could see on the pictures that we saw on the last pictures that I showed you. That's nice. I think like, yeah, the answer who was like, say like more times is inequality, disparities. So, and it's actually something which is related with what I do so far with my research, doctoral research. And that's something that, yeah, I mean, uh, was I paying attention to this like 10 years ago when I was in Yucatan, when I was studying sustainable management of coastal areas? So to be honest, I wasn't really paying attention at this. I was kind of starting paying attention at these aspects, the sense of I was knowing different realities than the one I have in Mexico City where I was living, but I didn't pay attention to those realities that we actually have in the same country that probably we actually live, but also then it's important actually to think in the different realities that other countries have, right? So while I was in Yucatan, I will share a little bit about my personal experience in this sense, right? So I was able at that moment to contact Colorado State University by mistake. I say by mistake because I wasn't meant to contact them. Actually, people from the Autonomous University of Yucatan were meant to contact professors from Colorado State University. But because I was in the National Autonomous University of Mexico, which was in Yucatan, the campus was in Yucatan, so they kind of got confused and I actually got an opportunity. So actually got to meet with like a group of people who were from the USA, most of them, but also from Mexico, and we all have different realities. So that was like the first, I remember it was the first time I went to the USA, and it let me think about like how like different realities can converge. And it was such a nice event, like when, in this case, professors gave us like this nice opportunity to meet different realities, but probably we all were sharing like same issues. So it was really amazing event. It was Rocky Mountain Sustainable Science Network 2010 that you may know. And thanks to that, I actually started to work in or to attend actually different events. And you may see some familiar faces. Lilian is here in a couple of pictures I just put here. And thanks to these events, I was kind of like, okay, what I should do? I was kind of confused between like, okay, should I go for national parks or should I go for disaster risk management? On one side, I was like kind of like trying to work with national parks because I was able to attend to visit these national parks, to be volunteering in those national parks. But at the same time, also was seeing different things that were happening in Mexico. Here, there are some pictures I took from Mexico, and they are the result of the storms that impact the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. So I was kind of like between national parks and risk management, and then at the end I actually decided to go for disaster risk management. But I never actually forgot like this, the environmental aspects and the national parks and how like nature can be linked with disaster risk management, right? And it was with floods, but why? We have that floods, we know that floods, or we may know that floods are one of the disasters, one of the three main events which are related to disasters, right? That most kill, where more people are killed, right? I wouldn't say floods kill people. Actually, our no actions kill people, right? Number of disasters per year is the floods is the kind of weather-related event that actually occur mostly occur around the world, and is the weather-related disaster that most affect people. Okay, and that's why I decide to go for floods, right? And that's why I started working on my bachelor's degree thesis that was mostly focused on the impacts of storms in Yucatan Peninsula, that you may know where it is. And because also I could see the different impacts that these storms could cause. I mean, the impacts plus the no preparation of the communities to face the impacts of these weather-related disasters, right? And then I started to study the physical aspects of these storms in the Yucatan Peninsula, right? And then I went for my master's degree, and then I started working on the economic aspects, which were mostly focusing real estate, and on the proposal of measures to enhance flood safety. So basically, two different case studies in Boulder, Colorado, in Acapulco, Guerrero, Mexico, and Ljubljana, Slovenia. So what I did here, it was to compare what was the flood impacts in the value of the properties, either outside the floodplain or inside the floodplain in different places with different contexts, right? And it was very interesting because at that moment I could see that, for example, the USA have a huge insurance program, and people who were in the floodplains, properties who were in the floodplains, property values were higher than outside the floodplains, which is actually different than Ljubljana and Guerrero, right? So, and I found interesting things. If you want to go more in detail about these documents, just go to the links. You can have access to this presentation, and you will have access to the whole file, right? And then, somehow I did study a little bit the environmental aspects, the economic aspects, but I realized that I was missing another aspect that was related to social aspects, right? You may be familiar with this scheme, which is related with sustainability, right? We have three different main aspects, and to actually promote sustainability, you may know that, yeah, we have to pay attention in these three different aspects, general aspects, right? So that's why, okay, I say, okay, what I have to do now, right? And that's why I came to Brazil. I came to Brazil because it somehow have a similar context than Mexico, but different reality in some aspects, like for example, language, culture. So, and it was a really nice opportunity to actually meet with other researchers from Latin America, where I could work and learn about like how, about disaster risk management, and where I start working with participatory methods. I just put some pictures here of the methods that I have been using so far, and they are very low cost methods, guys. So, and that's really interesting because especially in countries where we don't really have access to high amounts of economic resources, you have to look for different means. And that's very interesting because you have to be more creative in that sense, right? So what we did was to create a three-dimensional modeling to actually use as a communication tool with the different local stakeholders where I was studying, where I'm studying so far actually, participatory mapping, and then it was planned to have like more workshops and so on, but due to the current situation that we're having right now, so I have to change slightly my methods, and now I already conduct some interviews, and I will conduct some surveys as well, and I will try to conduct an online workshop with the local stakeholders, which I don't know how that's going to work, especially because the reality that, for example, living here, I'm living in the city where I am so far, it may be different to the one where I'm actually want to focus, right? Yeah, and these methods are used to investigate how people could enhance flood resilience with a sustainable approach, right? And yeah, you may have seen this quite a lot, right? So they are the Sustainable Development Goals. And I just want to mention that, yeah, even that directly or indirectly, I focus on some of or mostly all of them. I mostly focus in a few of them actually. I'm trying with this because to try to focus on these ones that are highlighted, since I'm working on disaster risk management. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to answer the questions that I already received because they were very interesting, and probably yeah, they were very helpful for guide. They could be, yeah, they could be very helpful for guiding this presentation because I didn't know what to present like properly, or what you were expecting from me. But it is nice that you were asking about the SDGs, and the ones that are highlighted are the ones that I'm mostly focused, because basically to face the impacts of disasters, for example, to face the impacts of disasters, we have to lessen vulnerabilities. And you are going to lessen vulnerabilities by achieving reduced inequalities, and you are going to make more resilient communities by using a sustainable approach. But you also have to pay attention in what we have to do about climate action, and also you have other measures which are related with natural-based solutions. So, I mean, there are different ways when you go to the SDG 2030 agenda. It is interesting, like the different topics that it does include. But yeah, I will be happy to share with you like some of there's a paper that I read a few days ago, which kind of mentions a little bit about what other objectives you think are missing from this sustainable development goals agenda. So another one who is not here actually is indigenous people, for example. I wasn't thinking about that, but when I read that paper, I started thinking about that. Yeah. Okay, so, but did I face any challenge so far? So yeah, of course. I mean, I'm not an English speaker, a native English speaker, so that was a big challenge. And now that I'm living in Brazil, I have to speak Portuguese as well. So that was kind of a challenge, but nothing that cannot be solved, actually. Resources, I know that in the academic world, especially in Latin America, it is interesting how value is, how it's not valued the academic world, and how like what will be the benefits for the decisions that are made in the places where we live. So it's actually very important to try to communicate as best as possible what we actually do. Otherwise, the people who provide those resources, they are not going to give any resources to the academic people. And of course, cultural aspects, which, I mean, the fact of moving from country to country is kind of very challenging, but it's also something that teaches you a lot. So I kind of encourage you to actually go anywhere you feel like going. I mean, you are not going to miss anything. You are going to miss probably your family. But that, I mean, that's nothing that cannot be solved, okay? So I finished with this slide, and I hope I just mentioned something interesting at least for you. And please, if you have like any questions about my works or any questions about what I do, so please reach me out to my personal Gmail accounts or Twitter or LinkedIn. So yeah, thank you, Emma.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Miguel. And I think we all appreciate both hearing about the work that you're doing, but also the journey that you've taken to get there, because many of us are kind of early on in that journey. So it's amazing to get to hear about your path and, you know, your struggles and triumphs. So thank you. And also the connections to the Sustainable Development Goals. You know, each of our class is split up into a bunch of different groups that are focusing on these SDGs. So I think a lot of us are really invested in this topic. So, and it's great to hear about, I think, I mean, your example, just there's so many interconnections among all these different goals. So thank you for touching on that. So next I want to open it up. So Mark Urban, it would be great if you could just give like a kind of 5-minute reflection on Miguel's talk. And then we have questions for both Mark and Miguel. It would be great if we could get some student comments in the chat, but my group has already come up with a good list of questions that I've sent to you both. So yeah, I'll give you the floor, Mark.
Great. Thanks, Emma, and thank you, Miguel. It's great to meet you virtually. Hopefully we'll meet at a future UN meeting of some sort. So yeah, I really appreciated your pathway to thinking about these issues. And I think one of the things that I find interesting is just how interdisciplinary you have become, and how this subject of addressing climate change and social dimensions, economic dimensions. I think that as we try to solve these very difficult problems, I think that from where I'm coming from as a sort of classic natural scientist, I find myself increasingly drawn to trying to understand different approaches and trying to work across other disciplines to try to make progress in these issues. I think it's a good demonstration that it's not as simple as just thinking about within your separate discipline to try to work across these boundaries. Of course, it's very difficult, and so I guess one question that I wonder if you would I see this as being more of a conversation until we at least for a few minutes. I wondered what barriers you've had in terms of working across these disciplines and how you've solved them. So just give you a short story of my own interactions. When I was a master's student, I worked on a team to understand how urbanization was affecting streams, and I was on the science team, and we collected all our stream invertebrates and looked at how they were affected by different regimes of stormwater and pollution. And then we had social scientists who were actually going out in neighborhoods and trying to understand socioeconomics and values of nature. And then we all came together at the end to try to come up with this big understanding of everything about sustainability in this urbanizing area. It turned out that we really couldn't talk to each other because we actually use different approaches to understand the world. Scientists were trying to apply statistics and understand that way, whereas some of the other people were trying to create a story from the facts that they had seen and the more the qualitative results that they had obtained from surveys. And in the end, we really just couldn't come together. We couldn't agree on how to understand this system. So anyways, that's just a short story, but I wondered how you've managed to really bridge all these different disciplines to get to where you're at right now.
Thank you, Mark. So actually, when I went from a bachelor's degree, for example, to the master's degree, it was kind of very complex to be together with so many engineers, for example, because it seemed that we were thinking like so different. So at the same point, at some point, we actually say together, okay, if we don't agree to talk the same language, we're not going to do anything. So that was kind of an agreement between them and myself as well. That because I was the hippie one in the master's degree, because I was with this approach, which was mostly focused in environmental aspects, and they were mostly focused in engineering aspects. But it came along. Also, when I was working at the National Weather Commission, I was doing a lot of things that were doing engineers. And since I was in that field entirely, so it was kind of complex, but you just have to become very open to actually say, okay, I will learn from them, And if they want to learn from me, I mean, I will be open for that. Otherwise, I mean, at least you try to. But I think that's very interesting to be very flexible about what you can learn from different people and from different, people with different backgrounds, basically.
Right. So kind of being open to it yourself, but also immersing yourself with other people and you know, eventually learning the language and where they're coming from, maybe.
Yeah, which is not actually very easy, as probably it seems that I'm saying, right? But it's actually, I mean, problems in our world are very complex. So we cannot see everything in a very simple way, because otherwise we're going to give solutions for simple problems that don't really exist. So we have to think more in a complex way, where we have to take into account different aspects if we actually want to propose something that works for reality.
So I want to leave time for lots of student questions, but just sort of as a part in a comment, you know, one of the things, you know, coming at this from as a natural scientist and starting to do more and more work in terms of urban ecology and sustainability, you know, it's just amazing how inevitably what comes up is the inequality of the societies in which we're working in. Is, you know, that there just is such a nexus of, you know, long-term inequality, you know, the effect of that on ecosystems. And I think you bring another element into the risk of, you know, the sort of, you know, flood management and analysis. So, yeah, I'm just wondering how, since you introduced all those themes, if you can kind of pull them together quickly in terms of, you know, inequality, ecosystem decline, and the flood risks.
Yeah, I mean, like, so many people complain about people who are like being settled in areas which are exposed to different hazards. But sometimes that I think like something that we have to take into account is that probably we have to understand a little bit better their realities. We cannot judge them just by the fact that they are in that place. Probably we have to understand. I mean, my intention with the pictures I actually show is to, okay, do you think they are living in that conditions because they want to live in those conditions, or because they actually don't have any more options to live in different conditions? So yeah, my point is that we have to actually think about the root, aspects that make them to live in those conditions, and probably we can understand, figure out solutions together with them. So and yeah, I mean, that's together, I mean, with different participatory approaches that I could actually found, I could find with my current research, which was when you give the voice to those ones who don't usually have that, so you can actually find very nice solutions that you couldn't even imagine that they could be implemented. So that's very interesting.
Great. Well, I'm going to shut up now, and you know, I want to hear from the students.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah.
Thank you both so much. I feel you've gotten a great conversation going, so we'll just continue on with this. So looking in the chat, Amina has a question. Amina, do you want to read this out loud?
Yes. Hi, Miguel. I'm Amina. I'm a fifth-year PhD chemistry student at Michigan Tech, and it was a very interesting presentation that you had there. So in the beginning, when you were introducing yourself, you mentioned the term different realities right after you were discussing the Human Development Index, which was quite different between the developed and Mexico and, you know, developing countries. So I'm from Pakistan, and I am in the United States. So one thing related to different realities that I face is that I look at so many environmental issues in a very different way as compared to how Americans would look at them. And sometimes my outlook and my intensity with which how I would approach those issues is very different. So, and that can, you know, so there is somewhat of a communication gap. And I was wondering if that's something that you have ever come across in your research, like because you're working on flood hazards and environmental issues and sustainability that are obviously quite different in Brazil and in Mexico as compared to the US. So do you ever see that difference in communication or research gaps?
Yeah, I mean, especially when I came back from Europe and I tried to apply the methods that the people usually are using in Europe, I just realized that it wasn't possible at all. So I should say I should think differently. You know, I thought, okay, that's not going to work for my country, or not in the same way, right? So that's why I kind of like probably right after I went back to my country, to Mexico, after the masters, was kind of frustrating to don't be able to apply those methods. But this kind of like methods that we learn in developed countries, they are really nice, but probably we're missing something. We don't have the same economic resources, right? But we have other resources, which are human resources, which are also very important, and we can actually take advantage of them. So probably it's kind of a cultural shock right after you go back to your country, but then you have to think, okay, let's think in a positive way. Otherwise, you're not going to escape from that. So let's see what are the opportunities I have here and how I can mix with the opportunities side of the actions or the things I learn in different places with different contexts and how I could apply them here and to see like if they are useful or not. But you really have to try to get into the culture because you are actually the one who are going to the place. I mean, they didn't come to you and ask you for help. You went there to say my research is the best one, right? So I think it's interesting to be like, to have that empathy with the local people as well and the local stakeholders in order to see what is actually interesting for them. Otherwise, we're going to miss like something there.
Thank you. That was a very good answer. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Karina, would you like to introduce yourself and read your question?
Yes.
Awesome.
Hi. Hello, Miguel. Thank you for the presentation. It was very interesting. My name is Karina. I am from Peru, and I'm working in the team of Emma on on the goal 14 and 15. So I was wondering, what are the impacts of the floods in the final body receptor, like the oceans? I don't know if it comes, or I guess it comes with with a high nutrient load, or maybe organic matter load, or also with solid waste. So what are the environmental impacts of the floods in the final body receptor? And my second question was mainly because in my team, we are trying to find a relationship between these two goals. And we want to know, like, if you have noticed any relationship between deforestation and the occurrence of floods in Latin America.
So thank you, Karina. Yeah, so the impacts of floods in, actually, I mean, there are different studies. I haven't studied that in detail, to be honest, but we can actually see how, like, for example, nature-based solutions, or actually ecosystem conservation can help a lot. Coastal areas when you have floods or storms, for example. So you can actually take advantage of them, like, for example, mangroves conservation. And that will be very helpful for mitigating the impact of floods. But yeah, I mean, at least, I mean, you can probably see in your country, or I can see in my country, that we don't really pay so much attention in how these ecosystems can play a role for us to be more resilient to the impacts of these impacts of the climate change. That climate change as well is a result of human activities. So at the end, it's nothing about nature. It's kind of everything about like human actions. So that's very interesting to try to think like the root causes and how we can actually mitigate those impacts. We have, of course, social aspects, but we have also these social activities have an impact on the ecosystem. So, and then I don't know if I answered your question, but if yes, I will go for the second one. So you mentioned something about my organic material. So there is a interesting study that, for example, deforestation in the Amazonia, right? We have a huge deforestation in this region of the Amazonia, and then there is more organic material going to the sea, and then I mean it's something that happened in Brazil, right? And then there is so much organic material available in the Caribbean Sea. And then you have like algae production, which was impacting so much the Caribbean Sea and the coastals there. So there is an impact there. I mean, we are living in a system which is connected. So we cannot just think like, okay, what I do here is going to have an impact only here. We are living on the earth, so which is mostly water, right? But we're living here, and what we do here may have an impact somewhere else. But there was another question that I got here about thinking about different approach instead of like, for example, taking into account watershed boundaries or that approach. I mean, like we have to think in more approaches that include how the ecosystems work naturally, and not how the city or country boundaries are constraining our activities. Because what we do, for example, here in Brazil, will probably have an impact in other different countries. So yeah, that's something that we start. I mean, it has been researched before. But it's something that we really have to pay attention. We have to think like globally in that sense, not in the sense that we are going to buy something from China or we're going to buy something from Brazil because it's cheaper. I don't know. It's not about that globalization. It's to think about what could be the impact that we're going to have if we do something here, and how it can impact other places that probably we don't see, but indeed they are being impacted as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So Mark, I want to turn to you with a question from one of the students in my group. So we've been talking a lot about today about disturbances, particularly floods. And so I'm curious, in terms of your research, could you talk a little bit about how disturbances like floods, also climate change, invasive species, how you're seeing those effects in the work you're doing? And this question is from Abby, who's from Michigan Tech University.
Yeah, thank you, Abby. So yeah, I guess since I started to have an interest in science, I was always interested in disturbances. I guess I have kind of a disturbed mind, I guess. So yeah, I've done research on everything from floods to invasive species to climate change. And you tend to see that if you look at the communities affected by these disturbances, that there are always some that are resistant and some that are really sensitive. And a lot of the biodiversity is actually, so the cumulative number of species, that a lot of them are of the sensitive type, and are these kind of amazing organisms that fit into these very specific niches. But those are the ones that tend to get knocked out first, whether it be by invasive species or a flood or something like that. And what you're left with often is sort of the really hardy, resilient, common species. Going back to that study of the streams in the urbanized area, you're left with these basically worms and biting flies, things that can survive anywhere. And when you think about that and the effects that has on the rest of the system, and human even impacts through biting flies, it's a very different system. respect to climate change is a bit different because there are very clear winners and losers. And, you know, one of the things that I've been working on is trying to figure out which ones are which. And, you know, oftentimes it's not always clear which ones are going to be the losers. And it really takes a lot of working in the system and trying to understand the basic biology of those organisms to figure out which ones are going to be affected. So it's not always straightforward, I think, with climate change, because it's often not the direct temperature that's the disturbance. It's often these indirect effects of changes in other species or you know, other changes to the system that are mediated by climate but are not a direct influence of climate.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. So trying to be mindful of the time, and since we're going to try to go into breakout groups soon, I want to thank you both so much for the great discussion. And Miguel, I just wanted to end with one other question from a few of our students had kind of a similar question. So you've obviously worked in many different countries, and so they were wondering, so this is kind of combining both a question from Ziki and from Colorado State University and Paula from La Molina in Peru, and they were wondering how does flood management and watershed management differ among the different countries that you've worked in, but particularly between developing and developed countries?
So yeah, asking to that question, I would say that it will depend not about like the probably economic resources that the countries have, but the actually political will and also research groups that are in the different countries that are sharing a watershed, for example, right? I have a few examples that, for example, in Europe, there is a river, right, the Rhine basin. They have a nice project about like how to work, it's transboundary cooperation, right? So, but they have to put like together different stakeholders from different places and try to talk about a river basin that is the territory on the different countries. That also happens between Brazil, Peru, and Bolivia. So they share a river basin as well. And even that they speak different languages, Spanish and Portuguese, it's actually nice to see how the researchers came together and try to solve or find solutions regarding to the impacts of, in this case, fires and floods. So there are several different cases, but yeah, I mean, I couldn't say developed countries and developing countries, because I think that is mostly depending of like the political will. I mean, there are some countries that they don't have enough resources, but they have more political will to actually do something differently, and the other way around, right? So it's really important to engage them as well. Otherwise, they don't feel part of that, and they don't look for any solution because they won't see any like positive impacts for them. So yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And thank you both. It's been wonderful and great to hear kind of just both of your experiences and so much of like what you speak about, kind of just how, you know, our goals are both thinking about land and water and life and also people, and kind of that diagram you showed with like all the circles coming together, thinking about how just how so much of life is interconnected. So thank you both for speaking to that. And I'd like to pass it on to Sarah now.
So actually, if I can go and thank you so much, Emma. And if we all have a second to turn our videos on and give Miguel a nice thank you and a wave. Sorry about the bad light, but it was thank you so much. Thank you for that wonderful conversation, and I really appreciate the different students. And Andrew has to work on the Brits to get them to ask more questions, but we'll work on that. And great sticker on your water bottle there, Miguel. I recognize that. I tried to post a picture of you and Tashi in the chat. I'm not sure if it actually came through. If not, I'll send it to you. But Miguel, do you have time to stay for a little bit longer?
Yeah, I can say.
Because we thought since the SDG team that hosted Miguel, which includes some of the La Molina students and I believe some Darby students, did prepare some questions that you didn't have time to ask. So we thought what we could do is have you join their breakout room. So you have some time to meet with the students with Emma so they actually get a chance to ask those questions. But I just want to make sure we said thank you to our speakers and thank Mark. Would you be okay in joining that breakout group as well?
Yeah.
That'd be awesome and help that her team move forward. So thank you so much for that. We are going to go into breakout rooms. I just want to sort of one last urging thing that Miguel did not mention is that we've actually run into him now in a couple different countries at the UNFCCC, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which is a very active participant with the delegation of Mexico on the actual negotiations. So I think it's important to ask when you get a chance on going not just into dealing with communities and their processes, but also on the international stage and how countries negotiate against water issues and flooding. So that real quickly is that we will go into our breakout rooms. Students, we will leave the breakout rooms open.